Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Aukin, the founder of ChopLocal. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at ChopLocalUniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Welcome to another episode of the Chop Local podcast. I'm Katie Altoff, one of the founders of Chop Local, and I'm so excited to be here with one of our Chop Local vendors, Anna from Over the Moon Farm and Flowers. Thanks for hopping on with us, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you have a really kind of a unique farm business in that you grow the cut flowers, but then you also sell meat. So give us, just to start out with, a little history of your farm and your direct-to-consumer enterprises.
Yeah, so my partner Shay Peshek and I started Over the Moon in July of 2019. So we've been around for a couple years now. And actually, the first crop that we ever sold as part of our own direct-to-consumer business was sweet corn. We sold about an acre of sweet corn that summer, and that's when we decided that we needed a name and we needed a website and insurance and all of the things that come with running a business. So that was the very beginning. And at that point, we were also raising dairy bull bottle calves just for the commodity market. So we were raising some livestock as well as part of a family farm operation. And we were at that time in 2019 raising just a handful of hogs that we were finishing for sale as just like bulk whole hog purchases and taking to just a small local processor near us. So that was the very beginning. And then in 2020 is when we really grew our horticulture enterprises. Our goal at that time was we wanted to start with something that would allow us to build up some cash flow, but didn't require a lot of upfront investment. So when you're starting a business, you kind of have to just start with what's accessible to you. And for us, we knew we didn't have a lot of cash to put in right away and didn't have a lot of ability to invest in infrastructure. So we started with cut flowers because you can turn a decent profit on a really small amount of land with not much infrastructure involved. So we started growing about an eighth of an acre worth of cut flowers, largely in grandma's garden beds and kind of in various places around the farm. We continued to grow some sweet corn that summer. And as we all know, 2020 was kind of the year the world changed. And so we found ourselves in a situation where there was a pretty hot and heavy demand for our cut flowers. A lot of people were home, especially in our rural community. There was quite a few elderly folks and people whose jobs had changed and looked different. And so there was a really strong demand for people to have cut flowers delivered directly to their homes. So we went from being a business that didn't exist to being a business with quite the following, quite the customer base just basically in one summer. So we started doing a cut flower CSA. So people signed up and received 16 weeks worth of flowers, and they paid upfront a lump sum for that offering. And we kind of had a boom. We had about 40 customers that first year. We were delivering all over rural Delaware County primarily, and some in more urban areas like Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. At the same time, we were continuing to raise a handful of hogs. I think we still had a few calves at that point as well. And we knew that ultimately both of our passions really lied in the livestock industry. So Shay grew up on a family crop and cattle farm, and so has always raised beef animals her whole life and knew that was something that was of interest to her moving forward. And I have also always been an animal person and had when I moved to Iowa after graduating college in 2016, I graduated with a degree in agriculture and had been involved in some farm policy work. But I had always been an animal person. I had worked on some dairy farms on the East Coast and am a cow lover as well, and had some experience rotationally grazing sheep and and knew that I wanted to be able to raise livestock as part of our business as well. So we kind of continued to dabble in things in 2020. Again, we raised a handful of hogs, just feeder pigs that we were buying in from some other farms. And again, 2020 was just that year. And so people wanted them to fill their freezer up. They wanted to feel secure in their food access. And so that kind of worked to our benefit as well. And then in 2021, we continued with the horticulture. We grew again. We ended up with about 150 people as part of our flower CSA. We upped it to 20 weeks. So it was really the whole summer. And that was the year that we also started raising some broiler chickens for the first time. At that point, we had the cash flow to feel like we could start incorporating more livestock, to start kind of increasing the diversity of our business. We had more customers at that point. Again, we kind of went from 0 to 60, and the moment and the economy kind of helped with that. And so we were raising some pigs, raising some chickens, raising some horticulture, building some basic infrastructure up, getting some freezers, having them licensed, being able to start thinking about what it looked like to sell direct to consumer cuts, working on our brand and name recognition, doing the Cedar Rapids downtown farmers market, which is quite a big one, especially at that time, when people were excited to be going back out again. And then 2022 was kind of the year we had just like this big transition and boom into doing a lot more direct to consumer livestock. We raised turkeys for the first time. We participated in this mentorship program that paired us with a farmer who sold and raised direct to consumer poultry and pigs. He's actually a farmer in North Carolina, Ben Grimes of Dawn Breaker Farm. And so he really supported us in introducing more broilers to our operation and doing Thanksgiving turkeys for the first time. And we both, I should say, I actually really was the one who really loved doing the direct-to-consumer Thanksgiving turkeys. It was a hit amongst customers, and it was a nice kind of influx of a little bit of profit in the fall. It helps us get through the winter. And I just thought it was so fun. I had a great time with it. We continued to raise kind of a handful of hogs at that point. And then I think 2022, I don't know, all the years feel like they blur together, but I think it's just kind of who we are, I guess. 0 to 60 is the nature of the game. We were still buying feeder pigs in, and we decided that we needed to have a more secure and safe supply of feeder pigs. So we decided to get some sows. Like many farms in Iowa, we're on a family farm that used to have hogs in the 90s or until the 90s. And so we had some old hog infrastructure. So we brought a couple sows back to the farm for the first time in 30 years and started farrowing that year. And I guess a couple years later, so here we are, beginning of 2025, we raise about 3,500 to 4,000 chickens a year, a couple hundred turkeys, a couple hundred Peking ducks. And then we are finishing right now about 60 to 65 pigs on the farm, all of which are born and raised here by our small but mighty herd of sows that we've been building up since then. We haven't bought any pigs in since 2022, and so really been building up a nice sow herd and selectively breeding for what we want and have really, really tasty pork. And so at this point, we have cut back on a lot of the horticulture that I talked about initially for a variety of reasons, both because it wasn't where our passions necessarily were. And when you're working this hard, you want to make sure you really love your business, but also because we were selling a lot more meat and have a little bit of a labor challenge in our rural community where we're at. And so we had the ability to scale up our livestock with a little bit less labor intensiveness than it takes to scale up a horticulture business, where there's not as much efficiency you can ever really reach. No matter what, every flower has to get cut by hand and every bouquet has to get made by hand. So we have kind of scaled that back down to be, we had about 40 people in our flower CSA last year, so kind of back to where we started. And 2025, we're still kind of making some decisions about where it all kind of fits together. But I would say at this point, the direct-to-consumer meat part of our business is a much greater portion of our sales. So here we are.
Yeah, it is quite the story. And you guys have done a lot of different things. And I think the
Yeah.
way that you started out, like you said, not as capital intensive with the flowers, but helped you get your name out there,
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense for some people. Now, one thing that you and I talked about probably a year ago or so when we chatted was that there was some concern over overlap between flower customers and meat customers. Like some of your flower customers might not be meat eaters
Mhm.
or they may not be interested in your meat. Has that really been a big issue? And if so, is that part of why you've shifted more towards focusing on the meat?
Yes. So it has been
Okay.
really interesting. And I do feel like it's been a great experience as business owners to really understand from two different perspectives, like what a target market looks like. So I feel like we've really had that experience with the flowers and running this flower CSA where our target market does look different than the meat. And I know that, especially, I look at the flowers and I see many people buying it or were buying it as gifts or for grandparents or folks in nursing homes. Like that's a very different audience than who's buying your direct to consumer meat. And there is some overlap. I won't say it's been zero. But when I look at my like ideal customer for the flowers, it's not the same person that's an ideal customer for the meat. So it has taken some shifting. I think that as we have tried to be really intentional the whole time we've grown our brand about being honest about who we are and what our values are and what we are doing. And, like running any small business, it's a little bit like you take it or leave it. Like this is us in our entirety, and we are the brand for the most part. And so yeah, like we've grown flowers, we've experimented with different things, we raise livestock, we really believe in providing protein for our community, we really love farming, and that's not for everyone, and that's okay. And that's, it's okay if there's people that have only wanted to buy the flowers from us. And when there's people like that now, as we've kind of shifted those offerings, I've been sure to point them in the direction of other people that are growing direct to consumer flowers or horticulture farms in our area to make sure that they can find what they're looking for. But, I think a lot of our customers have really embraced us and our business for everything that we are. And if it's the right fit, then that's great.
I love that. And I love what you said about knowing your ideal customer and having those two different audiences. Maybe a more common example of that we run into when I talk to different farmers is that they might raise seed stock or they might raise feeder pigs.
Yep.
And then they also sell
Mhm.
pork or they sell beef and they want to put it all on one website. And I try to explain that concept that
Yes.
you are marketing to two different audiences and having it on one website, one brand, one social media channel can be really, really difficult because the people who want to buy your Angus bulls or your Angus cows are not the same people that want to buy your Angus beef, right? Both are great products, but
But
it's
they're
not the
different.
same audience. So,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. And I think, like you said, there's probably more likely to be more overlap with the flowers and meat than there would be with like seed stock
Yeah.
and the actual animals, but or I mean, I'm sorry, the meat and the
Yes.
seed stock.
Yes.
But
Yep.
still it's really important to think about that. So, your ideal customer for your meat, who is it? What are they like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's also important to say that we have a lot of different markets that we're selling into at this point. And so it's when I think about, so I would say this year when I look at our sales, like about a third of our sales were just like actually direct to consumer, like straight to an individual from our e-commerce platform. And then about two-thirds of our sales were wholesale, either through a food hub or through a wholesale channel we have developed ourselves, or we actually raise chickens directly for another direct-to-consumer farm brand. And so there's different kind of target markets that I look at in terms of institutions and whatnot. But when I look at our ideal customer just on that direct-to-consumer side, I would say it's typically a family. It's typically a family that's interested in supporting local generally. They're probably someone that maybe they attend a farmer's market or they shop at a local co-op or they're just generally excited about local products and they go to a farm store or something like that. They feel enthusiastic about supporting local communities. And it's usually people that cook at home, and I would say our customer, it's kind of shifted. It's definitely more 50-50 in terms of men and women at this point purchasing. I think our business started with primarily women purchasing, and now I'd say it's pretty 50-50. But people wanting to cook at home who are enthusiastic about the flavor of food. They might identify as like a foodie, but they also just might identify as someone that values higher quality products. And so yeah, and again, I think our audience, so we're located in rural Delaware County. We're about a 40-minute drive or 45 minutes from downtown Cedar Rapids, and about a little over an hour from the Iowa City metro area. And so we have quite a few customers that are in those areas and the surrounding towns south of us mostly, but we do have some customers in more of the rural counties around us. But many of the folks who buy from us are in more urban environments.
Yeah. And for everybody listening that doesn't know Iowa as well as Anna and I do. So
Yeah.
Cedar Rapids is it the largest city in Iowa? If not, it's close. It goes back and forth with Des Moines, doesn't it? Or it
Yeah, I
might be
think
the
Des Moines is
largest.
bigger right now, but
Okay. It's pretty
yeah.
close. And Iowa City would be another major city. I put
Yeah,
that in
it's still pretty
quotation marks
small.
since we're in Iowa. But
Yes.
yeah, so you do have a little bit stronger customer base or a different customer base than if you were, say, 2 or 3 hours from some of these cities, which some of the farmers that we work with are.
Yes.
So I think it's
Absolutely.
interesting that you said 50-50 split men versus women because that's what we see on Chop Local too. When we've
Mhm.
looked at names, that's about the same. One thing that I think is interesting, and this is using our data from Google Analytics, so it's kind of predictive. It's not 100%, but our audience skews a little bit older than I expected, I guess. I would have thought with e commerce, you're looking at younger people, and I get all my generations mixed up, but more
Yeah.
millennials, that type of thing. But our best customers that order a higher amount at one time, so a higher order value, and spend more money on Chop Local are in more of like a 45 to 60 age range. Is that what you see like at farmers markets and stuff too? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that seems pretty aligned with who purchases from us. I think families that, parents that are kind of in that range, especially in the like 40s to 50s, is aligned with us.
Interesting. Okay, that's good. That's good to know that
Mhm.
it's similar for, that we're seeing similar things. Obviously, you're on Chop Local, so your orders
Mhm.
are playing into
Yeah.
that data as well. But interesting to see that that's what you're seeing at the farmers market too.
Mhm.
So I want to know if beef is on the horizon for you again, then. Do you think that you'll raise beef again?
Yeah, so we were raising some beef and then in selling into the commodity market. We also did some of our own direct to consumer beef back in 2022 maybe, a couple years ago. And our biggest like challenge in having all of these different enterprises is obviously cash flow, right? Especially because we have gone the route where we process all our animals at a USDA inspected processor, then we pick the meat up and then we sell things as individual cuts. And so it takes a minute to recoup the cash that goes into both raising the animal and then the processing costs and then the marketing and distribution. So we just simply had too much that we were trying to manage and felt like beef was the hardest one of those to cash flow, especially with a higher commodity market happening for it at the time, and still happening. And so, ultimately, yes, it's on the horizon. We right now are having some conversations with some other young farmers where we hope to build some relationships where we can do a little bit more aggregation. I would say at our current scale, we are fairly maxed out in terms of our own like production capacity, but we're not maxed out on our own like marketing and distribution capacity. So we're hoping to build some partnerships. We've been doing a little bit of experimenting with that this past year and the year before, and so it's something we're trying to do a little bit more of in 2025. So, we definitely love eating beef and we want our customers to have access to all of the things that we enjoy, and we think having all of the species is great. But yeah, I would say everything's on the horizon still.
Yeah. Well, and you guys have changed so much over the last few years, it wouldn't surprise me to see something like beef pop up too.
Totally.
And you're right, like customers customers want all of those options, and we see that farms that are diversified, although it is more management, it is more work, you really can create a one-stop shop for your customers to get all of their proteins from you, which is great. So let's talk about some of those proteins that you are raising right now. Pork. I will be honest, pork can be a hard seller, especially in Iowa. It can be hard to sell because there's just so much, we're surrounded by so much pork it's raised differently than yours, but it can just be hard to move. So what have you seen really work in your pork marketing, or what do you think the key is for you guys as with your pork?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really important point there. Pork can be hard to move for sure. So one thing that I think that I've learned about marketing our pork is I try to really focus on the fact that it is like a different product than grocery store pork. And that's not like a statement, it's not a value statement. That is just like, it's a different breed. The pork looks different. There's been, a decades long national marketing campaign to market pork as the other white meat and to raise hogs that are really lean and to give people an option of a protein that's, it's more comparable to a chicken than it is to like beef. And so our pork looks different. We raise purebred Berkshire hogs. We focused on keeping that purebred herd because we really like the flavor. We really like how the meat finishes. We end up with really nice fat caps, lots of nice intermuscular marbling on different pork cuts. And the meat is really red. It's really tender. It looks more like beef than pork. And so part of the marketing is just trying to make sure that people understand that they're not buying something that is comparable to what you're going to purchase on a grocery store shelf. It is a different product. It is a niche product. It is, I don't like the word luxury, but it's different. It's just different.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that was a masterclass in how to differentiate your product without bashing another product. And that's something that I feel really strongly about. That's one of our values on Chop Local. That's one of the things that we require of our Chop Local vendors is that you can say that your product is different, or you can say that on our farm we focus on sustainability, or we focus on rotational grazing because of soil health, but you can do that in a way that doesn't, put down another product, another farmer, or something like that. It is, like you said, it is different. And I think you're right. People need to understand that because once they see it or once they taste it, they recognize that.
Yes, totally. And that is a value for us. And we feel strongly when we market our own products that we also don't want people to feel bad or shame when they're going to the grocery store. And we know that, people are doing the best they can. And so that has been a belief that we've held with all of the products we raise. So getting people to understand it's a different product. I would say that, the hardest thing is getting people to try it for the first time. And once they do, it's usually a pretty easy product to get people to continue rebuying. I find myself even surprised with how well things like ground pork sell. There was a period of time I wasn't even putting it on ChopLocal. I wasn't even putting it online because we had some other wholesale outlets for it. And so I figured I would just move it all in those different channels. And I had people emailing me. And so I did a couple just individual sales of some bulk people buying ground pork because they love the taste of it. It is very flavorful. It is more comparable to eating something like ground beef, but it is, a little leaner. And so that has been something that surprised me is that the flavor is really great. And we find that people, the pork chops are like none other that people have had. And yeah.
I agree. I bought a half a hog. We're not big pork eaters at our house. I'll admit it. We eat a lot of beef because we raise our own. But I bought a half a hog from one of our other Chop Local vendors, and it was a Duroc, so another niche, heritage breed, and it was unlike anything that I'd ever had. Also, hope my dad never listens to this, but I grew up having overcooked pork chops at least once a week for supper.
Yes.
That is a problem, isn't it?
Problem.
Yes. So if you're listening and you don't know how to cook a pork chop, 140, it can be a little bit pink. We don't have the same issues with animal disease that we used to. And so don't overcook your pork chops. And if they're bone
Yeah.
in, know that you're going to have a little bit more carryover heat close to that bone too. So,
That's the one thing I feel like it's just a constantly telling people like use a meat thermometer, use a meat thermometer, use a meat thermometer, because then you will not overcook your pork and you will enjoy it. Because that is a
yeah.
big problem of just people not knowing how to do it. And that's, that's
Yeah,
a
and
bummer
like you
when you
said,
have,
if you grow up with a different product or you're used to a different type of product or a different cooking
yes,
style, that my dad loves his pork chops, but not for me. So, yep.
I totally understand.
What pork cuts? You said you were surprised that there's been a demand for ground pork, but are there any cuts that like just aren't moving very well or don't move as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is definitely some seasonality to it. So, something like pork roast, I feel like I didn't move very many at all summer. And then the fall came, and come November, I moved quite a few. And that's part of why I think it's important to have different outlets as well. So to have direct to consumer through e-commerce, but then to also have some other wholesale channels where it's a little easier to maybe move some products that might be going a little slower, or to be able to stock our products in other people's farm stores and things like that to kind of diversify some of those challenging periods. But I would not say there's anything that doesn't move. Even recently, we had a customer approach us that they wanted just like all of our pork shanks, just like an individual. It's like, okay, just, not the smoke talks, like just the actual shank. And I was like, great, I will sell you
Yes,
all our
please take
pork.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. And even at this point, like, I feel like we get more emails than what we can handle for people wanting anything we can give them, livers, hearts for dog
Yeah.
food, things like that from all our species. So I wouldn't say that there's anything that we like really struggle with. But again, it's having a diversity of outlets.
Yeah, the roast surprised me because what we've seen is that roasts don't move as well as what most farmers think that they're going to. And so having the ground products and you do some added products, like you do some brats, don't you? Is that right? And some
Mhm.
sticks. And
Yep.
then the latest, which I just got to enjoy, is your new salamis with your pork as well. Now,
Hmm.
those all have a much higher processing cost, right? And
Hmm.
like for the salami, you're driving quite a ways to get
Yep.
to a processor. But how, I mean, has it been worth it? Are you going to keep doing it?
Yes. Yes. So we are going to keep doing it. So yeah, for the first time this year, we offered a shelf stable salami. We offered two different kinds of salami, and then I did a pepperoni, which was kind of a personal choice because I really like pepperoni. But so for that, we had to take hogs to a USDA inspected butcher where they were processed as primals. And then from there, they went to a processor who specifically does the value add of salami, and they do some other products as well. They did like an applewood bacon for us with the primals from those hogs. And so we just did a couple, I can't remember, we did maybe 3 or 4 pigs worth of salami this year, so it wasn't all that much, but it was an experiment. And it did do really well. I think I'm almost sold out of everything. I still have some pepperoni, and it has a year-long shelf life of being a
Wow.
shelf-stable product. You refrigerate after you open it, but besides that, it's good to go. And yes, there was an added cost, of course, of the driving. We had to drive about 2.5 hours to the location where we dropped these hogs off to the butcher initially, and then got lucky that the other processor was actually willing to transport the meat to their shop just down the road. And so then we had to go back and pick them up. But, I would say it was worth it. I think customers really enjoyed it. It was a different kind of offering. I always feel like, having some of those like little products that are good to gift, they're tasty, they're kind of a good thing for someone to try out and differentiate us again, a little bit different is good. And they did really well in some of our other channels, like in people's farm stores and some other online farmers markets that are more regional. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, we'll
it's
keep
hard to
doing that.
find in the Midwest. It's hard to find those more like
Yeah.
higher end charcuterie meats, I would say. I always joke about Midwest charcuterie when we put our summer sausage and our
Oh,
sticks on it
yeah.
and some
That's
cheese, but But this is
Yes.
like fancy, I feel like. So.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
And it was delicious. And you're right, those little things, on Chop Local, like we put an order minimum to get free shipping. And so, for example, I went ahead and ordered two of your gift boxes, one for
Yes.
Sydney on our team and one for me. They were $35 each.
Yep.
That got us to $70. And I'm like, I need to get to 75 to get free shipping. And
So you
so
got
what
some
did I
sticks.
do? I add on some sticks, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yes. Yeah, and the sticks do well and the brats do well too. So it's good to have kind of the range of things. We're about to take a big load of sticks tomorrow to Des Moines for an event that you're speaking at, Katie. So you can enjoy some.
oh, yeah. By the
You can
time that
enjoy.
this episode airs, it will be past the event, but Anna and I are both speaking at the Midwest Meat Summit, which is kind of in cooperation or in coordination with Practical Farmers of Iowa's annual conference as well. So I'm hoping maybe we'll have more meat summits to announce because our team, Sydney and I went
Yeah.
to the Carolina Meat Summit
Oh,
last summer in Boone, North
it's
Carolina,
supposed to be a
and
great one.
it was outstanding. Like
Yeah, that's
800
what I've heard.
producers there and Dr. Temple Grandin, and it was so cool. And so anywhere you're at in the country, keep an eye out for these meat summits. It's kind of the same team that organizes them, and they are just fantastic. So, really excited for that event. Okay, so pork, we talked through a little bit. Get people to taste it. I've been asking everybody this question: is your pork paper wrapped or is it vac packed? I can't remember.
It's vacuum.
Vacuum packed, vacuum sealed. Okay. And when you take it to the farmer's market, because you've done Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, right? When you take it to the farmer's market, do you let people, like, what's your display look like? What's the whole setup look like?
Yeah, so I will say we actually did stop doing the farmers markets this year. I did it through early July and then decided to transition away from it for a variety of reasons, including the desire to make sure that we're building a business that feels sustainable in the long run. So we have a 1-year-old at home, and so I want to prioritize making sure we have a business that allows a future where we can go to soccer games on Saturdays and not have to be at the farmers market. And so made a big transition away from that. But we did do the Iowa City Farmers Market for 2 years, and my display was so this year I would put some charcuterie meats just on the table so people could see them, and again they're shelf stable, so it wasn't a concern. And then I had these little smaller cube coolers that I put on my table with different products in them, and then I had bigger coolers in the back where I pulled inventory from. And I did have people look like I tried to avoid having people like digging through my coolers, but people were able to look at them. And that was kind of like, especially a good selling point for things like pork chops. When you look at them and you say, oh, wow, that looks really good. Like there's a lot of fat on it. Like that's a nice big chop or things like that. And so it was helpful, I would say, for products like that people do really want to see and visualize.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I like the idea of the smaller coolers up front. So they're not just like rummaging through everything and
Yes.
you have the risk that the vacuum seals are going to break or it's going to
Yes.
get disorganized or, yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. You know what you said about transitioning away from farmers markets. I feel like I talk to a lot of farmers who their dream is to not have to go to the farmers market all of the time. And so I know direct to consumer is online direct to consumer is an alternative to that, but also your wholesale stuff. Is that a huge part of kind of being able to move away from farmers markets?
Yes, I would say so.
Do you, with your wholesale clients or customers, do you offer them a discount or how does that work?
Yeah, it really depends on volume. And there's a variety of primarily working with the different food hubs in Iowa. They all kind of operate a little bit differently. So there's a food hub in the Iowa City area that has like both a retail side and a wholesale side. So they do this like online farmers market. So that's just like us listing things at a retail price. But then they also work with institutions. And so then yes, there's like uh, offering things by the case where there's like a wholesale discount involved. And then, similarly working with some other food hubs where maybe they're one food hub that, was purchasing quite a few hogs as just like whole hogs, and then they're selling them themselves, both through like retail and wholesale outlets. So everything operates like a little differently. But yes, we've had to kind of navigate figuring out what volume we need in order to be able to offer a wholesale price that still makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky part about wholesale is that it really is it's not one size fits all and
No.
it's what their needs are. And a lot of times I think when farmers think wholesale, maybe this is more so on the beef side, but they think restaurants. But
Yes.
restaurants don't really play a part in yours, or have they? Or
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. It's something that has really shifted through the years. So there was one restaurant in Cedar Rapids. Unfortunately, they no longer exist, but there was a period of 2 years where they were really an important part of our business. They were buying all of the ducks we were raising, pretty much. I mean, we sold some retail, but they were a major purchaser of the ducks. And then they were purchasing chicken every week, and then they would purchase kind of miscellaneous whatever else we wanted to sell them. They purchased a lot of things like chicken backs and whatnot. And we had a really great relationship with them, and I felt like it was very mutual, and it felt good, and we were getting a fair price. And unfortunately, due to some challenges, they're not in business anymore. And so, kind of after that relationship ended, we've explored a little bit of restaurant sales. We have done a small amount, but have found just personal preference, personality, just who we are as people, it's not our main outlet. It's not an outlet that we're like particularly excited to pursue. There's definitely some farmers that do pursue it and it works for them and it feels good. But I think you have to have the right fit. And we just, since that one restaurant closed, we just haven't found another restaurant where the fit felt quite right, I would say.
yeah, okay. So we need to come back to the poultry, the chickens.
Okay.
But I
Yep.
think this is a good place to ask because you kind of mentioned this already with what you're, not wanting to do farmers markets anymore and then thinking about like who you are as a person and what's a good fit as your wholesale outlets. I know you guys are very collaborative and that's something that we love about working with you. But how would you define success for Over the Moon? And maybe that's like success in the next year or
Mhm.
success 5 years from now. I'll leave that open. Whatever makes sense to you.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think for us, like more and more, we found that we really define success as being able to continue farming for the long haul. We want to make sure that this is a business that's financially sustainable. It's sustainable for the land that we have access to, that it's sustainable for us as people. Especially, I think we found that as, you know, we're getting older every year and it's hard on your
And
body.
you have a little one at home. That
Yeah.
changes so much, doesn't it?
Yes, it changes so much. And so we want to make sure that this is something that we can do and that we can make sure that we can manage things, for hopefully a long time into the future. And I think so being able to continue is how we would define success. But I also think, I think we really define success as we want our business to be a building block in our community. We want to be a building block for other businesses to be able to continue making it. We think that direct to consumer livestock businesses play a really big role and can play a really big role in supporting our local rural communities. And so, piece by piece, I think we just want to make sure that we are supporting other businesses and other people in the ways that we can. So I think if we can keep doing that and grow the ways that we're doing that, then I would feel like we've succeeded.
I love that. Very similar to how we feel at Shop Local, and also there is a level of personal fulfillment that relates
Totally.
to that, I think. And that's part of being a little bit mission driven, which you
Totally.
you kind of are. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
Love it. Okay, so chicken. We talked
Yes.
about off air before we were
Mhm.
filming. You have been raising chicken, and you've never done on farm processing. You've always used an inspected processor and done cuts of chicken.
Mhm.
So that is hard for some people in some areas of the country.
Mhm.
But if I'm correct, you are driving out of state for that right now. Is that right or no?
So in the past, we have driven out of state. We were going to Illinois. For the last year and a half, we have been going to a processor in Iowa. on the
Okay.
border of Minnesota, but in Iowa.
Okay. So still quite a drive
Yeah.
for you, right? I
Yes.
mean, how far is it? 2 hours?
2.5 with a trailer, you know, at least 2.5.
Yeah. Okay. How many are you getting processed at once when you take a trip up there then?
So it really depends. Like our goals usually, so we have found this is an infrastructure problem, but we have found that our truck and trailer can comfortably handle about 450. So we load chickens into chicken crates, and so then we were able to fill the bed of the truck and the trailer, and you can only go so high, and you can only fit, have so many chicken crates in a trailer and still have proper airflow. So it does depend a little bit on the season, how hot it is, and how many that you can fit. We really need a bigger truck and bigger trailer, but those are, problems for a different day. So that's as many as we can do at this moment.
So then you get the inspected retail cuts, right? And why did you choose to go this route versus doing like the on-farm whole bird processing?
Yeah. So we have always gone the route of doing the inspected cuts for a variety of reasons. One is we're just not set up and not in a location where we ever felt like on-farm pickup would be a good fit for us. We're pretty
And in
far.
Iowa, if you process on farm, you can only do on farm pickup. Is that correct? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we knew that we were not set up for that. We're on a multi-generational family farm. We're pretty rural. We just weren't set up for that. And we also have always felt that like butchery of any kind is a skilled, hard labor that people do professionally. And I have a lot of respect for the people who do it on all scales. It's really incredibly hard work. And so, as a business owner, one of my own values is making sure that we're supporting other businesses. And so, I've just always felt like there are people that are doing this professionally and I would love to pay them to do it. And that's a cost of doing business, and I will price my products accordingly, and hopefully that helps other people make a living and helps other communities have job creation. And we need more processors in Iowa, and so I'm glad to support them, and that's always how we have felt. And with chicken, we do get the best profit margin from selling the individual cuts versus the whole bird. And we do sell some whole birds, and that's good too. It's nice to have a mix. But we've also always felt in our selling of meat, like we want to make sure that we're selling things that are, as accessible as possible in terms of cooking. And we're not like master chefs at home, and like we enjoy having things like boneless chicken breasts. And so it's a relatively safe assumption that like our customers will like that too, and they appreciate having things that are like, good quality but also easy, because everyone is busy and people are trying to feed their families and trying to work, and so you can't cook a whole chicken every night. Even though it's not hard to do, it's still like an extra step versus throwing a chicken thighs in the air fryer, which is a pretty easy, and having them be really good. So that's part of it as well.
So do you sell out of chicken breast really quickly compared to the other cuts then?
It depends a little bit. I actually feel like chicken thighs have become more popular. People really like the dark meat. Yeah.
Have you heard of the Lazy Genius?
No.
Okay, people listening to this podcast are going to be like, what is Katie's obsession with the Lazy Genius? Because I mentioned it in my interview with Jared, which will be our first episode
Huh.
too. But the Lazy Genius, Kendra Adachi, is like one of the most amazing people that I know. I don't know her. I've read her books and
Okay.
I listen to her podcast, and I think that I know her because she's changed
Yeah.
my life. She has a recipe she calls Change Your Life Chicken, and it uses chicken thighs, and it's a sheet pan recipe.
Okay.
And
Huh.
I need to order some chicken thighs from you and
You've
try
made
it because
this.
I've never made it. We eat a lot
Yeah.
of turkey breast at our house,
Totally.
but for this recipe, you put the chicken thighs on top of the vegetables and you want the fat to drip
Oh.
down into the
Uh-huh.
vegetables. And
Uh-huh.
that's not going to work with turkey breast or chicken
No.
breast, right? You got to
No.
have the thighs for that. So,
Yes.
that's what we need to try.
You need to try that. Yeah, I think chicken thighs have just gotten popular, and so they sell out pretty fast, and then the breast do too. I would say all of the chicken sells pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard to find
Yeah.
chicken directly from a farmer that is in cuts. That's not whole chicken. And it's something we see a big demand for on Chop
Yep.
Local as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, fun. Okay, well, we're gonna have to make this recipe sometime and
Yes.
see how the chicken thighs go
Absolutely.
over. So let's see. I want to see if there was anything else. We talked about your pork. We talked about your poultry. We've talked about how you drive a long ways to get the processing services in order to really create the products that customers want, right? I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yes. Yeah. And I will say, like, it's been a journey to kind of figure out what the right places are that work for us. Again, it's kind of all about like making sure you have like synergy with that other business. And so yeah, we drive 2.5 hours to the poultry processor. We go to Stacyville Poultry Processing, which is up by the border of Minnesota, and we really, really love working with them and get a really good product in return. They do our chickens, turkeys, and ducks. And then for red meat, we use a couple different ones, but we go to Nimrod, which is in Iowa Falls, and we drive, it's about 2 hours up there. So it's not as bad. It honestly feels like way easier because when you transport poultry, you do it. We usually leave the house around 3:30 in the morning, and so you transport them in the dark of night still, and so
Mhm.
it's an up at 3 and then on the road, and it's a pretty dark rural drive. So when we take hogs, it's like 2 hours, but it's at 7 a.m. So it's night and
Right.
day. 2 hours feels like no problem when it's light out. So it is a lot of driving there and back. A chicken week ends up being someone spends 2 full days on the road, basically.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah. That is hard.
yeah,
Oh, well, I'm excited to see what this next year brings for you and everything that you
yeah.
guys are working on. One other thing I wanted to touch on quickly is your social media game is pretty strong. I would say you're really great on Instagram at sharing stories and things like that. Any tips or tricks that you would share for people on social media?
I mean, I would say that I think that social media is a necessity for running a direct to consumer business, whether we want it to be or not. I think any kind of business that you're running in today's day and age, people really do want that behind the scenes as much as you can give it to them. And so, uh, I think just going for it and trying things out and seeing what resonates with your customers is probably my biggest piece of advice. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be perfectly planned out, and people really just want to see what you're doing usually. And sometimes it's my content that, like, I don't know, I just like snap a picture of something and it ends up getting like the most engagement or views on stories. And I'm like, oh, it's like a picture of my boots or something. But it does really well versus like things that are really planned out. So yeah, being willing to try things out and just kind of going with it because the algorithms are always changing and there's always different platforms. And so, you know, uh, figuring it out as you go.
I do know. I do. I think what you do really great is like you said, behind the scenes. It's not just about like selling, selling, selling. It's behind the scenes. This is how it was raised. And also the social proof of, oh, I'm fulfilling an order.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And also you include a lot of photos that show your face so people can really like get to know you. And I think that that's
Mhm.
really big.
For sure. Yes.
And then email marketing, you kind of stepped that up a little bit this year. Has
Mhm.
that been worth it for you?
Yeah, I would say so. So I try my best to do a weekly email, although I think for the first time in my whole time running a business, I gave myself like a Christmas break. So that was a big personal step. I gave myself 2 weeks
Just
off, like
relax a
not
little
feeling,
bit. Yeah.
yeah, to not feel the pressure to do that. But I do send a weekly email pretty much every week. I try my best. And I would say it is a really important driver for orders. Yeah,
Yeah.
announcing new products, telling people what's in stock, because we do have all these different sales outlets, like I think it's important to continue to remind people about the logistics. Like, again, we do like quite a bit of home delivery, especially because we do work with some of these other outlets. Like we try to couple all our deliveries. So like we'll drop off at a food hub and then do home deliveries, and we try to partner with other farms and things like that. So once a week, we're in the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City area. When we were kind of at the height of the season, we were doing twice a week. We do one day of shipping. And then I would say at least once a month, there's some other type of order where things are going to Des Moines or Grinnell or things like that. But to remind people of where we're going to be is important. To build some hype around things is helpful as well. And I think I feel like there's been a good increase on our email list this year. And like I said, kind of with the transition from less flowers to more meat, I've seen somewhat of a shift of some of those people that maybe don't eat meat or don't want to. Some of those people have left and some new people have come, and there's, been kind of a constant flow, which is good. And that's how we want it. We want people that are actually engaging and ordering. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I think both your social media and your email list is probably really important for moving away from those farmers markets, but still keeping up with those customers, right?
Yes, totally. And I think, while we were doing the farmers markets, we were pretty vigilant about gathering emails. And so I always had my email sign up available, and I did get quite a few people from that. And so that is probably something that we're missing out on, but it's a sacrifice that we're willing to make, but, trying to convert those people that we were seeing in person to being customers still.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's something we talk about a lot with people is you can capture those customers and keep them year round if you're using social media or especially email really effectively. So, well, Anna, it's been so great to talk to you today, and I really appreciate you sharing all of your tips and your journey with your direct to consumer business all the way from the flowers to the meat. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, if anybody wants to check out Anna and Shay and learn more about Over the Moon, you can look them up on Instagram or Facebook and on their website, Over the Moon Farm and Flowers. Okay, thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to ChopLocalUniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.